Is everybody here for the Easter egg hunt? Right. Hey, Mickey, how are you? Hold on, I'm just trying to get the microphones up. Check, check, check. Check, check. I bet they switched. Remember, didn't we switch one out? Yep. Check, check, check. Is everybody here for the South Abington Easter egg hunt? That's at the Henderson house. It's not here tonight. Where did that twist from? The top? I couldn't
remember. I was channeling Emily's inner Wednesday.
No, I like it. And I like that. And it's live.
Check, check, check. Check, check. Can you tell if this is plugged in? Yeah. Can you tell that?
Hello?
So why don't you just infamous the others, I suppose.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
No. Guarantee that.
Start off. Chris, you want to move over? Why don't you move over?
Yeah, well, they're only size 10.
Hey, Warren, why don't we start with the kids?
No. I mean, is that okay?
Okay, so do we start?
Let's
Have
the
a
kids.
presentation.
Yeah. We'll do the kids, and then we'll start.
Okay, but
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So tonight we are truly honored to welcome South Abington Comet captains. So thank you so much. We're going to turn it over to Mrs. Coyne to do a brief introduction. I think Mrs. Coyne is still working on organizing the little ones.
Hello, and we would like to welcome you to the April 5th board meeting. Behind me are some amazing students from South Abington. I am not doing any of the talking this evening other than a quick introduction, which could be shocking because sometimes you can't stop me from talking. I have 5 students, actually 19 of them wanted to read, but I only had 5 parts. So that's how motivated and amazing these children are. So at this time, I'm going to ask for my first speaker to come on up to the podium.
Good evening. Good evening. I am Abra Moran. I, along with my fellow peers here tonight, are happy to share some exciting news with all of you. Before we get to the good part, we would like to provide you with an introduction.
Hello, I am Bradley Timms, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about PBIS. Each of the 4 elementary schools in our district have a positive behavioral intervention and supports program, otherwise known as PBIS. Now, here's the good part. As part of PBIS, 4th grade students have the opportunity to be Comet captains. Those of us here tonight, along with some of our classmates who were unable to join us, have had the privilege of being Comet captains this year.
Hello, I am Gavin Palucci, and I am going to tell you about what it means to be a Comet captain. Comet captains have the responsibility to model the 3 R's of the PBIS program. The 3 R's being respectful, responsible, and ready. Comet captains also have to put their best effort into everything they do. Finally, Comet captains get to assist with reinforcing appropriate behavior with the rest of the students in the morning at arrival and at the afternoon at dismissal. Comet captains are given a special badge on special star cards. The special star cards can be given to students who are showing 3 R's.
Hello, I'm Karis Reese, and I'm going to tell you how a 4th grader can actually become a Comet captain. Any 4th grader interested in being a Comet captain has to fill out an application. The application has 4 questions. Question 1. In what ways do you show respect to the adult and peers in your classroom? Question 2. What ways are you responsible in school? Give specific examples. Question 3. Why is it important to be ready in school? Give at least 2 examples. And lastly, question 4. What if your best friend asked you for star cards? What would you do? The applications are submitted for review by the 4th grade teachers and Ms. Coyne. Once approved, new Comet captains are chosen each week.
Hello, I am Piper Archibald, and on behalf of all of the South Abington Elementary School Comet captains, I would like to thank you for inviting us to join you this event. We are very proud of the work that we do to be Comet captains. Go Comets.
Before we go, can we take some pictures? And I know Kelly's going to give away some certificates, but before we do, I just want to say a couple things, and I'll keep it brief. I'm so proud of all of you. It's one thing to go through school every single day and model excellence, but when you're in front of us like this, I wrote down in my notes, ambassadors of excellence. Captains are leaders, and this is a great example, families, of leadership in action. It's one thing to get a card saying you did something right, you modeled what was respectful and what was responsible, but to live it and to see all of your peers looking up to you is another thing. And families out there, it isn't too often, correct me if I'm wrong, that we get to thank you and see this many of you. So without all of you, this isn't possible. What we see here is a direct result of all your hard work and support. So you guys did a great job, but you need to help me out. And when you turn around and see your parents, I want you to give them a big thank you and a big hug, all right? All right.
And you know what, guys? Your good behavior also makes all of us better.
I will announce your name for certificates. Stay here, because then we'll turn around after everyone's received certificates and you can take some photos. Okay? You can, I'll say the name again or not? Okay. Brooklyn Akins. Piper Archibald. Joseph Bernard. Lucia Castellani. Penn Eckenrode. Reagan Erickson. Lainey Gilboy. Owen Kazar. Lily Kalichitz. Clover Keeler. Hannah Kroptavich. Jake Lawless. Hazel McCormick. Colin McDonald. Molly McGurran. Chase Meyer. Aubrey Moran. Gavin Palucci. Carice Reese. Ava Repshis. Nico Ruggiero. Bryce Smith. Samantha Sparacino. Alexis Steinberg. And Bradley Timms. I'm sorry, I left one certificate on the table. Nanya Pillay. Absolutely. So, now when you turn around, face this way. If you're tall, take a step back. If you're seeing the back of someone's head, take a step forward.
You'll be in front.
So I just want to say one more final congratulations to our Comet captains. We do have Comet captains who are in this evening. It's a very popular role to fill. New Comet captains are announced every Friday afternoon. You know, they'll be announced tomorrow. We don't have school on Friday. And it is the most suspenseful, exciting part of the day. We always do a drum roll, right? We announce at 2:30. We do a drum roll, and 2 Comet captains from every class were announced to take on that role, starting that Friday afternoon and continuing the next week. They take it very seriously. They do a great job. They truly are role models in our building. So I'm very proud of them, and I'm excited that they are so excited to be Comet captains. Congratulations.
The only one who packed. what all this says that we talk about programs. That's the idea. And all of them out there, everybody knows when you go to school. There's different variations, but I haven't seen one where we have a conflict happen. And that's when I talk about. Oh, you know why? I bet because they think people are going to say something. I gotta go talk to them. I bet.
We could just threaten to have the Easter egg hunt at his house instead.
If there's anybody that wants to speak tonight, can you raise your hand? Okay. It's all good. It's all good.
Chris. A second.
Thank you.
Yes. Michelle's here. Michelle, we're just getting ready to start.
Sorry. I got it, Chris. I got it. Honorary.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid the meeting's going to go downhill from after that performance, but you know, it's a great way to start a meeting. Welcome to the Abington Heights Board meeting of April 5th. Would everyone please rise and pledge the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
May we please have roll call?
Mr. Abdallah.
Here.
Mr. Azar.
Here.
Mr. Fleming.
Here.
Mrs. Henderson.
Here.
Mrs. Karam.
Here.
Mr. Medensky.
Here.
Mr. Robeson.
Here.
Mrs. Tierney. And Mr. Acker.
Here.
Thank you.
Can we please have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Any comments, changes? In that case, roll call, please.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mr. Fleming.
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson.
Yes.
Mrs. Karam.
Yes.
Mr. Medensky.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney. Yes. Mr. Abdallah.
Yes.
And Mr. Acker.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next item will be the superintendent's report. Dr. Schaefer, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you much, Mr. Acker. I am going to pass the baton over to Mr. Mirabelli, who will be providing us with an updated budget forecast for 2022-23, our current fiscal year.
Can everyone hear me? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Schaefer. I would like to, just by way of introduction, just talk about all the focus we have on next year's budget, right? We've talked about it since January. But before we get to next year, we have to settle up on this year. And so where we stand currently is an important indicator of what ends up in next year's budget. So we need to understand where we're at to understand where we're going. So the million-dollar question I get every year from my soup is, where are we going to finish the year, right? So this is, I'm calling it version 1.0 at my forecast of where we will finish the year, okay? So where we started 22-23, this was like the first normal year coming out of the pandemic, right? So it was good to get back, and it was good to sort of get our expenses and revenues on more of a regular schedule. Prior to that, the prior 2 years, as you see in the last point, we sort of lost a trend, our historical trend line for expenses, which were a little bit more predictable when you have building closures and buses not running and irregular mandates from the state where you must pay everyone and regulations handed down during the pandemic. We sort of lost the trend as far as historical data. So now we're starting to rebuild that trend in this current year, which is our first normal year. Another thing of note is that we passed our budget in late June of 2022. The state then passed theirs after we passed ours. So it was very different from what we had anticipated, and I'll make a note and quantify that for you in just a second. Where we've been, Pennsylvania budget included significantly more subsidy than we had anticipated. Local revenue collections remain strong, as we report basically every month. So everything you see here will probably be a little bit of a review because we continue to talk about this, whether it's in a formal financial report or through the lens of academics. But these topics, I don't think will be shocking or jarring to anyone. Stimulus funds are beginning to sunset. ESSER 2 will sunset at the end of this year. Another major event that occurred was that the district and AHESPA, the support staff, ratified a 5-year deal in, I believe, September. And special education costs have continued to rise. Revenue projection updates, you can see in the red, we don't have a lot of bad news there other than real estate tax appeals, which we're all aware of, are eroding our tax base. We anxiously await a tax reassessment from the county. Real estate transfer taxes are slowing. There's less inventory on the market, and I think mortgage rates are preventing some people from getting into the market. So we're seeing that the revenue of sales transaction diminish a bit. We're also keeping an eye on earned income taxes. The month of February was the first month we've seen sort of cool off. And that was a county-wide thing. Could be due to timing of payments, but it could be an indicator that salaries are starting to maybe slow a bit. But we're going to keep our eye on that as we go forward. On the tailwind side of things, as you've seen in your monthly board report, our real estate taxes came in a positive fashion, $247,000 more than budget. Earnings on investment, thanks to our bond purchase program, $245,000 more than budget. These are projected numbers. This is where I project us to finish. Earned income tax, even though we see some slowing, it's $269,000 projected to be over budget. We had an IDEA stimulus grant that we can use for special education costs come in additional to our normal IDEA grant. $112,000, and the state subsidies, which I mentioned, $522,000 more than budget. And then at the bottom, I didn't put any amounts next to these grants, the safety and security, mental health, and school resource officers, because the revenue also matches up with an added expense, right? Except for the underlined one, the mental health, which we are using for a school counselor position. So, and we would hope that this grant would continue for at least another year. And we think the proposal that the governor put forth represents a continuation of this. On the expenditure side, we have a little bit more red here, and these are again projected numbers. Special education tuition and outside placements. We see this coming in $787,000 more than budget. So this is any student which is ours, which is sent off campus, whether it be to a charter school, cyber charter school, or an outside placement. Professional staff salaries, that would be our teachers, our specialists, coming in at $215,000 over budget, primarily due to some sabbaticals, absences, and having to pay the benefits and the salaries at the same time that we're also paying a substitute teacher, a long-term substitute teacher. We see supplies and consumables coming in about $95,000 over. Those are some one-time projects and investments that were made primarily into academics, but also some maintenance supplies on some things that need to be repaired. VOTEC tuition is coming in $87,000 more than budget due to an increase in enrollment in those programs. And specialty drug costs are rising nationally. So we're seeing that becoming a bigger and bigger piece of our medical spend. And you can see at the bottom, in a tailwind situation, we did see, after some really scary warning signs that we were going to have a really big spend this year in the medical fund, we saw the claims started to taper off and or stop-loss insurance started to kick in. So we're still experiencing claims, but those high claims are now kicking in until June 30th. The stop-loss insurance will pay. Now, we'll probably pay a higher premium next year on the stop-loss because of the experience, but at least for the current year, it would appear that we'll come in somewhere even with the premiums that we're paying to ourselves, so to speak. That's going on a little bit on a limb there as far as where we'll end up in that fund, but that's what it looks like with 3 months to go. Okay. And the other tailwind that we saw, which is not necessarily a desirable one, is aides and paraprofessional salaries are $144,000 less than budget. And that is due largely to positions that remain vacant, unfilled. Okay, so here's the slide that presumably people are interested in seeing. So this is the projection overall, what it looks like. The first column, the 22-23 budget, you can see that's what we passed back in June. And the expense line item, the $53,595, excludes the $615,000 contingency that we have in the budget, right? So we sort of took that out. So we started out, when you take those revenues and those expenses, with a deficit of $1.835 million, okay? And this is all on the website, by the way, so if anyone wants to reference it, it's posted publicly. When we compare the revenue performance, and you saw all of those individual line items that had very positive variances, you can see that when you compare the budgeted amount to the projected amount, we have a positive difference of $1.77 million more than budget, okay? Because of those strong revenue categories that we described before. However, on the expense side, when you look at 53.59 versus 53.87, we are actually projected to spend a little more than we budgeted. So we're spending into our contingency here. So if all my projections came to light and this was sort of a retroactive actual, we would be using the contingency fund for a second year in a row. So, but the deficit does shrink largely because of the positive revenue performance from 1.8 million to 338,000. Does anyone have any questions on that? Okay. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So for next year, the $215,000 that was over budgeted for the professional staff because of long-term subs coming in and what did you say? People taking a sabbatical. Are you looking to budget a higher amount for next year? Are you projecting that that's going to stay the same?
So I'll answer that question. It's not a simple yes or no. I will answer that question with, we will take a look at every single staff member's step and column placement, and we will place them according to what the salary schedule says. So every individual that works for Abington Heights will have a specified salary, which will specifically go into the budget. And as you know, that salary schedule increases by 3% year over year. So yes, it is very likely that that number will go up. Yes, we will review why those variances occurred more specifically than I've presented tonight. And if there are any trends that we identify or issues we identify, there will be a budget escalator for sure. But if it's an anomaly and we find in the data that there's a budget, reducer in there, we would be decreasing. So that's a long-winded answer to say I can't tell you specifically, but we do have a pretty thorough process to go through with respect to salaries.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay. Any other questions? Good.
Greg, did you have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry. And this is going forward. I know we have positions that we filled with the funds that we got through the pandemic, and one of them goes away this year. Is that the one that's, how much is that? About 500K?
580,000.
500, and then the following year, which is the next year's budget, that's close to 900K, right?
780, I want to say. Yeah, it's up there.
780.
I believe it's 780.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's just
my pleasure. So finally, the slide here is where are we going, right? So we're going to use this forecast to inform our budgeting for next year. So to Michelle's question, we will review the data here, and we will look at line items, particularly the special ed line items, to say where are we going to go or why did this occur? And then we'll talk to our special ed department to say what's the plan, where are the placements, who are the players. Transportation, same thing, electricity, gas, everywhere in the budget you can look, we'll review this data and we'll establish a new trend as to where we're at, right? Because I said we sort of lost that trend in prior years. So we'll critically look at this, and it will absolutely cause us to make adjustments in next year's budget, from changing from what you'd seen in January to now. So we'll do this exercise monthly, and to the extent that there are updates to provide, I'm not going to sit, if the estimate's good, I'll just let you know the estimate's good, but, you know, an estimate is just that. But if there are changes to it, I'll come back with another report similar to this. We'll have additional budget updates and presentations. We're going to leverage the software that we have to create updated multi-year budget models, right? So looking just at 1 year at a time is not necessarily the best way to budget. We should be looking at long-term planning, specifically the next 5 years, and then what does it look like in 10. And then we'll present and adopt a preliminary budget in May, and we'll look at the final budget adoption in June. Any questions? Thank you.
Jim and Dr. Schaefer, very nice job. Thank you very much for the update. I think it certainly makes a lot of us sleep a little easier, seeing the deficit go in the right direction. Okay, next item on our agenda is public comment. We have 4 people that have asked to speak to us. We ask you keep your comments to about 3 minutes. When you come up, please state your name, where you live. Our first speaker tonight is Becky Stokes.
Hi, I'm Becky. I live on Maple Ave in Clark Summit. A few questions for you, and I'd like to make a few comments as well. Are we teaching cursive writing to our kids in elementary school?
How about, I'm sorry, if you ask your questions and make your comment, then once you're done, what we'll do is we'll address all your questions. That way there's some continuity. Thanks.
Okay.
Sorry.
As far as I know, my daughter's not learning cursive in 3rd grade. I believe this is a big concern. How will our children read our founding documents when they get older? If they want to look at our Constitution, if they want to look at things that are in cursive and they can't sign their signature, they can't read them, I believe that is an agenda that we're all falling for. We're indoctrinating our children with a bunch of outside garbage, and it's filtering in to our school system. And I know you had mentioned that about 125 students have left the district, and I know a lot of those parents, and I can speak for them. There's a lot going on that they were not okay with in Abington. That's why they left to a virtual type school, a cyber charter school. I believe if you go back to some of your basics, my daughter does not have books. You know, our kids, they're coming home with handouts, copies. We need books for our kids, like an actual book. You used to put the cover on the book when you were in school, and you put the I don't know, the tinfoil or the paper or the newspaper. They need books. We're given this grant money, and I hope we're not using grant money for salary positions. That should be used to buy materials for our education, for our school. I'm paying tax dollars, and it needs to go to the right places, which is education, not more pension funds, more union dues. I mean, it needs to go where it needs to go, and it needs to be, accurate and no misusing of funds. It needs to go where they're supposed to go. I believe we need to go back to some of the basics. I went to Abington for many years, and I'm not happy with what I see going on. I'm really not in the long run. I walked into Clark Summit Elementary today, and I know God created rainbows as a sign he would never flood the earth by water again. And a lot of organizations take something good and they turn it to symbols of inclusion. I want to call them alphabet people, whatever you want to say. I'm not okay with normalizing and indoctrinating our children to manipulate their bodies, to do crazy things. And we're allowing this to filter in. We have a crazy transgender guy hanging in the middle school. The student council allowed 8th grade hall or whatever, the hallway there, with Mulcahy or Milani, whoever this guy is, who's a transgender woman, for Women's Month. He's hanging a portrait. He's hanging on the wall. If you all had a restaurant, and and 100 people like to steak dinner, or 99 of 100 like to steak dinner, and one person didn't, are you going to change your recipe to meet one person? No, you're probably not. You have 99 people. So what we're doing is we're taking a minority of people and indoctrinating as if it's normalcy. And we're filtering this in and pushing it. There's some books that I found. I can't believe were on the shelves in our school, and I have them. I can't believe what I read. And we're allowing this stuff to get through into our school, and it needs to stop. You know, I can speak for these parents. I could give you a whole bunch of names of why their children left the district. Because of this stuff. Go back to the basics. Teach children to be unoffendable. Don't teach kids to rise and be offended by everything. Put on your agenda to teach them to rise above an offense. Teach them to be unoffendable. That's what we need to do. You know, I could say I'm offended by all the rainbow stuff. I'm offended by all this alphabet stuff you're pushing. But I'm not going to do that because I'm going to rise above it and I'm going to do something better and greater than that, than be offended by that. Okay? I'm not okay with some of the stuff that I see. I go, wow, this is not what I grew up in here in Abington. I grew up here in the 80s. I was here for many years. And it's a great district. It's one of the top in Pennsylvania. But you're slowly, it's progressing where I don't want to see it progress. It's going down the tubes. And we're allowing this stuff to creep in. And it's creeping in. And I can speak for many parents. So just, I would just like to know why we don't have textbooks, actual books, why we're not doing cursive writing, and why is the mental health increasing? You know, why is this stuff happening?
Thank you, and I'll have Dr. Vitale address some of your questions, and I'll say a few things.
So when you say there's no textbooks, we do have textbooks, not at every grade. Some grades have consumable, which are workbooks. So we do have text and consumables in nature typically, and I don't know the grade span of your children, so I apologize.
Third, all she ever gets is papers. She has paper handouts every night.
Right.
Some paper handouts. There's no books.
So we've moved away, and I want to say, as long as I've been in education, we've moved away from a math textbook at the elementary level. It's typically a consumable book with worksheets that they pull out. So instead of students having I call it like the hard knocking book, they have a workbook that they use as their instructional resource. As for cursive, I have to say, I'm not really sure whether we teach cursive or not. I can look into that and then get back to you on that.
Okay.
I'm being told that we are teaching cursive. We do teach cursive then. I don't have to get back to you. Wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Let me make sure I had everything down.
Mental health.
And yeah, sure. And I'm going to respond to you in a manner similar to how I've responded to some others. And what I should say at the outset to manage expectations, that I don't want it to be back and forth. I can give you my phone number and you can have a conversation with me and you can come back twice a month and speak to us. I think not only personally but professionally that education is a pillar of democracy. I've talked about this over and over about our obligation as a community to our children. And as public educators, all of our students should be welcome. In fact, it is a public institution and we allow every student within our boundaries to come, right? You know, I joke, I give our school my 3 best. They're the only 3 kids I got. And I know that there's some flaws in some of them and there's some strengths in the others and they kind of complement each other, but you're getting my best. And when they walk in the door, what I want and expect for every child is to have a caring, compassionate adult who is empathetic and there. And in some cases, we have that every single day. In some cases, we have instances, whether it's on the ball field or in the classroom or on the playground, that doesn't happen. And what I'm thinking about now is how this meeting started, and I know that you were here, and we had a whole bunch of Comet captains. And these are students that model those qualities and characteristics that we want to grow and nourish throughout their career, to be responsible and respectful. And I say that because when I talk to families, our job as public educators is not to supplant family values. That is not our job. Our job is to provide a caring and compassionate place where we mold and work with students and families to make sure they're ready for whatever the next thing is for them. And regardless of where you are, our job is to be there for our students and families when they have success and that they also struggle. And we have a lot of students that are challenged, and it is not our place, and in my mind, it is never our place to judge what is exciting to a person, which is something that is challenging to a person. If someone asks and reaches out, our job is to be there for them. So when I hear about indoctrination and mental health, I on occasion do get a little frustrated because we tend to forget where we have been. Mental health, and I've been in education for 28 years, has always been a thing. I talked about warm fuzzies and cold pricklies way before the atmosphere that we have right now. Students struggled with drug addiction. I was in school in the 80s. Students struggled with drug addiction just then. I remember listening to Twisted Sister, Tipper Gore, tell me I was going to go to bad places by listening to that. And now I've got like Snoop on a shelf in my house. So I'm not so sure if all of this makes sense, but what I can tell you is that we will not judge. We do not push one ideology over another. We're here for our students. And on top of all that, my job, in part, is I'm obligated to make sure that the board doesn't overstep federal, state, or local regulations. And all of our students feel safe in our schools. And now more than ever, that can be tough because in some cases we have competing ideologies. But at the end of the day, our focus is going to be on the kids. I'm not so sure if this long diatribe has answered any of your questions, but you know how I personally and professionally feel about it. And, my phone's always on, so if you want to give me a call to talk about it, that's no problem.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, this is such a big topic now. Maybe at our next work session, it might be appropriate to review or to present our strategy toward DEI as a district. Because it's only in questions like this that we talk about it publicly. I'm assuming we have it's in a policy somewhere, our diversity and inclusion strategy, or?
No. I think I hear equity, inclusion, diversity. There are districts that have policies specific to that. We do not. I would respond to that the same way in which I responded to Becky, I believe. I got it right. Is that I want all students to feel safe. I want to provide everybody with a caring and compassionate background. It's very important that we are not overstepping or trying to supplant any types of family values. Some of this, as I think Becky mentioned, was the books. And our curriculum committee has done a very good job with this, and we also have board policy in place where we have a process for parents and students that may object to certain content within something, and a review process for that, and a process to opt out, and that's enumerated within our school code. But as far as any types of benchmarks or goals, some types of equity, diversity, inclusion types of policies that I've seen in other places that set actually numerical goals, we don't have anything like that. I don't know if I answered your question.
My thinking is you hit things head on.
Like your mic is on, they can't hear.
Is it on now?
Yeah.
Is it on now? Being censored. So is this better?
Try again.
Push the button.
I would only say that, this is a question that's come up. It's pervasive, right?
Right.
If our policy is not to have a policy, I'm okay with that. But it's a question that keeps popping up, and it's on everybody's mind. I think we should hit it head on. We shouldn't wait to be asked. We should present our approach to this. And you did so just now, and I appreciate that. I just think, I don't know if it's well known, that approach. I don't know if people understand that that's our approach. And I agree with you. But it's just going to keep hitting us. And I share her concerns about, honoring, people that, I don't know if it's appropriate to honor people that not everybody honors. That is, the majority of people may have a problem with. So.
I do, Mike. I hear what you are saying, and this will be a continued discussion. I'm not so sure, or at least I hope, that what I'm voicing hasn't been a different practice that was from in the past. Because I do think from talking to community members and an alumni is that Comet Nation has been strong. And we led the way in many different areas, making sure that everyone felt safe and included. And it's worth the discussion. When I see some policies that start to enumerate and develop lists, that can be a very slippery slope. And in this case here, and I sent an email to the board about this, it is very important in my judgment, and in the judgment of our solicitor, be thinking about the nuance, right? There's a teacher and then there's a student. And students have rights to express themselves. In fact, that's also enumerated in board policy, and we have to discern those differences there. Ron?
Yeah, I just want to add, and I'm not going to wade into the debate. I respect everybody's views. I respect your views. I think that we have to, like you say, have empathy and respect, especially the children's views. And I'm not sure that everybody is aware of this. Like I have 3 kids in that middle school, and it was very it was talked about a lot. The topic of that poster. I just want to be clear because I don't think that everybody knows this. It wasn't a poster. It wasn't posted by administration. It wasn't posted by a teacher. It was a crayon drawing by a child that was approved by student council. It was not something that the school put up. Now, the school didn't take it down, and people will have a problem with that, and I respect them having a problem with that. I just want to be clear with the community about what we're talking about. It was a crayon drawing by a child. It was not a poster of, there's all these professional posters that are put up for Women's, History Month, Black History Month. This was not a produced poster. This was a child drawing, so I just wanted to be clear with that.
Ready? Yep. Okay, Jillian O'Malley.
Good evening. Thank you for just letting me speak in general. I'm here today to address and bring awareness to what I perceive as an unhealthy expectation on the mental health professionals within our school. These professionals have to meet the needs of fellow students, including myself. These needs consist of building a personal relationship with students in order to provide a safe space, comforting them, comprehending and understanding their emotionality, and being able to set themselves within a child's perspective without being biased, all while processing their own burdens. It's difficult in itself to maintain these multiple relationships throughout the schools with different grade levels in itself. It's so undeniably important for these vulnerable children to have consistency within their therapeutic environment. Due to the change of scheduling, expectation, and budget, it's become unmanageable for those professionals who have already built strong, safe relationships with many, many students. This abrupt change decreases and limits comfort and help for when students need it. Time is not allocated properly to correlate with the demand of support from students who deal with mental health issues, and the most important variable is time. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Thank you, Jillian.
Thank you. Lindsay James.
Hi, my name is Lindsay James, and I'm captain of our powerlifting team at the high school. I just want to thank you guys for your support and the funding that we were able to get. This year we were able to get singlets, and most of our team fees were paid for. Our team now has over 50 members, and this year the high school nationals was held in Scranton, where we were able to enter about 17 lifters. Our girls, 2 of our girls took the national champion place, and we were able to hold our female and combined team title. So again, there you go. So again, I just want to thank everybody for the support and the funding that we were able to get from you guys.
Thank you very much. And when I went back to get the names, one thing I said, and I gotta thank Mr. Abdallah for sending this to me, but he sent a picture of your new singlets. I guess you guys posted on Facebook, and I saw it. So I have to tell the board that, you tell the board, do those singlets look good?
They look good and they feel good.
Right, they fire, right? Yeah, all right.
Hey, Chris, that's national. That's like national. That's not state. That's
So where do these get hung up? That's what I want to know.
Perfect. Great job. Great job.
Congratulations, guys. That's wonderful. And congratulations to Coach Welcome. Jen, back in Breton. I apologize if I didn't get that right.
It's okay. As like many of you guys know me, my name is Jennifer Bache in Brighton, and I have 2 boys in Abington Heights School District. As some of you know, I have been singing the praises of Mrs. Sanders and Miss Leah for the last 4 years at the middle school. This team of learning support teacher and social work has been instrumental in my son Ryan's academic career and mental health. Some of you may remember he had been suffering from severe anxiety caused by bullying during his 4th grade year at Waverly Elementary School, and he was extremely anxious going to the middle school. Miss Leah and Mrs. Sanders made it possible for him to overcome many of his issues and his concerns during his tenure at the middle school. However, it took both of them for this to happen. I am extremely disturbed to learn that Abington Heights has taken a step back instead of a step forward when Liz Hemphill from the elementary schools decided to take a new position at Scranton. It is extremely concerning to me to know that my son, who is now in high school with Jessica Ferretti, is now going to be deprived of her much-needed support. My son's anxiety over the summer has come to a point where he needed more help than my husband and I and our family and his other health providers could provide. Jessica Ferretti has been a lifeline at his high school, along with Lauren Krupnich. I always say her name wrong, sorry. I am disturbed to have learned that you will be expecting Ms. Ferretti now to leave the high school on certain days and go to the elementary schools to take over Liz's caseload. My son needs access to his social worker and his support team when issues arise that he need and when his issues arise, and he does not need to be told, oh, Ms. Ferretti is not here today because she's at CSE. Or, oh, you can wait because she'll be back in an hour. Mental health doesn't work that way. He needs his social worker there throughout the day, every day. One never knows when an anxiety attack or a crisis will happen. We don't always know what will trigger them. Mental health is not a joke. It is not to be taken lightly. And I feel that the administration has taken an approach that puts all of our students, not just my son, in jeopardy. I am sad to have learned that Miss Leah at the middle school has decided to hand in her resignation, which will unfortunately be effective as of tomorrow. You have broken up a team that has proven time and time again that the way they work together and help our students cannot be beat. Our students deserve better than this. Abington Heights needs to now hire 2 social workers, not just a single social worker and counselor. Each level of education deserves its own. Mental health needs to be supported with our schools, not just at home. My son came home the other day, and he was extremely upset when he learned that Miss Leah was leaving, because even though he is now at the high school, he still depends on Ms. Sanders and Miss Leah because they have an open door policy. And when he had his, I'll call it a breakdown, when he had his breakdown in September and he had not known Ms. Ferretti yet, Miss Kate and Miss Leah were there for them. They called me, they reached out, and it's just amazing. I mean, you don't get that dedication. And as to Beth, is that her name, Beth? I'm sorry, the student, it's so true. You need to spend the time, and he hadn't developed that relationship yet with Ms. Ferretti. Thankfully, he has that relationship, or he's still getting into that relationship. But now you're expecting her, and he's gonna feel abandoned, and that's another sort of a trigger for my son. So I guess my question is for you guys, is what exactly will you be doing? Because you can't expect Miss Leah, who has 30 students, like I'll say registered students and cases in the middle school. How are you expecting her? I'm assuming that now if she has to do the elementary school, that she's now gonna have 15 cases if she's supposed to split the load with Miss Ferretti. And I don't think that's fair. She has 30 students in her school, and they are able to come to her whenever she needs it, and they're able to go to Ms. Sanders or her room and she's there and she can help right there. That's 30 students all the time that she checks in with every single day. And now, if another student had something happen, they can come in. So it's 30 students plus. So I know that my 3 minutes are up, and I greatly appreciate it. But please, 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 I'm begging you guys, think about hiring 2, not just 1. Thank you.
Jen, thank you very much.
Jen, I will respond because I think it's worthy of a response. You came here of your time and you told us your story, and I was unfamiliar with your story, so it is a pleasure to meet you and that of your son. And again, I would, I can give you my number and we can have a conversation, and I will consider and talk about this. And what I will tell you is one thing that I will never do is compromise the safety, particularly the mental health, the safety of any of our students. And I've said publicly many times that this school board hired a former school counselor, and there's a board member that was also a former school counselor. So, you have a group that has a background in this, and I would say that that's a bias, and I said that during my interview, and it probably still is. It is. And what I can say to you is this: I have the utmost respect for all of our staff members, particularly any and all of our staff members that work with students on mental health challenges and successes throughout the year. And as a parent, I can also tell you one of the most fearful things are the transitions. Transitioning from an elementary to a middle school when you've had a child that's developed a rapport with teachers, counselors, social workers, and then you go into a new environment. And then once you get used to that, there's another transition. And why this may not answer your question, what I can tell you is I have full faith in the 3 counselors at the high school, the 1 crisis counselor at the high school. We have a social worker that can cover. We have a director of student services at the high school. We have 6 mental health professionals that are up there. And I know that doesn't replace your child's experiences at the middle school, but I have all the faith in the world with the staff at the high school and how they attend to the needs of all of our students. And some of the things that you described, they see on a day in, day out basis. And we are, hiring, advertising for another counselor. Correct.
Just a question is, if you're only replacing 1, then how does that help? You still now have 2 categories. You have the middle school and the elementary school. So how does that?
I don't want to. Yeah, I can talk to you after about how we balance this out and the staffing based on our needs.
Okay. Anyone else? In that case, let's move to the action and discussion items. Dr. Schaefer.
Mr. Acker asked the board approve the personnel report as presented.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 9-0.
Mr. Acker asks that the board approve the revised 2022-2023 school calendar.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion?
And just for Mr. Acker, for people that are listening to this, because I got a lot of questions from constituents. So the adjustment on this calendar, the main point, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that graduation will be on June 9th, which is a Friday.
Correct.
And student last day.
Correct. June 9th, Friday, students' last day, and graduation.
Okay, roll call?
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
And Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 9-0.
Mr. I could ask the board approve the 2023-24 school year academic calendar in addition to the support staff calendar.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call?
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 9-0.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask that the board approve a daily rate change for Branich busing, specifically van 2B to $208.27 and van 3B to $240.40 as of March 1, 2023. This increase is due to transporting a PM kindergarten student to and from school.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call?
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 9-0.
Mr. I could ask the board approve the estimated budget proposal for the Abington Heights Middle School musical production staff roles and responsibilities.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? I just have to say that it was amazing, budget and what they're hoping to do. Very exciting.
We did
Roll
a great
call?
job with them.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0. Thank you.
Mr. I could ask the board approve the school board provider agreement between Abington Heights School District and Aviana Healthcare.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 9-0.
Mr. Acker, I ask the board approve the following Abington Heights School District job descriptions as enumerated in the files: school nurse, reading specialist, PK8, occupational therapist, psychologist.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. On the motion?
Dr. Schaefer, on these job descriptions, I know we've been rolling through them and they made a lot of great progress. Can you give an update on where we are? Is there many more to come, or is this?
The list seems to never end, Mr. Azar. I did not know there were this many job descriptions available, but what we've done is we've prioritized them. I believe the list was getting close to 100.
Right. I believe we have less than 15 left, which is really exciting.
Any other questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
And Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 9-0.
Mr. Acker, ask the board approve the food service management company renewal contract for the 2023-24 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Mrs. Karam, on the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Abstain.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 8-0, one abstention.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask that the board approve the first reading of Board Policy Series 000. As a reminder to our public that are here and listening, this is not approving these policies. This is approving the first reading. There's a mandatory second reading before we approve the revised policies.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much for the seconds. And on the motion?
Mr. Acker, just if we have a question on any of the items after the first reading, is now the time to bring up a question, or is it at the second reading?
Anytime.
Anytime.
I just, and you know, it's a very thorough document, and I get a lot of questions from constituents of, during public portion of the meeting, do people have the right to participate in the public part of the meeting if they're not in the district? And if they are not, or if they are in the district, do they have to say, you know, what region or street where they live? I know sometimes that has wavered a little bit on what the rules are there, and I didn't see it in the policy, but I didn't, so I get that question a lot, and I really don't have a consistent answer for it. I was always under the assumption that public participation involved the people that are in the district, like residents, but I'm not sure. I didn't see that in there, so.
Let me double check on that. You're correct in that you need to be a member of the Abington Heights School District, and we ask for certain demographic information. Perhaps we don't double check that, but let me check in on that.
Phil, in answer to your question, it was at one time. If it isn't, it should be.
I believe I've recently seen some mention of case law about this particular item. And being an old guy with bad memory, I'm not going to say what I remember because I'm sure I'll say the wrong thing. But I think it's a good question and one we really should look into.
And just a comment, it had nothing to do with people that participated today. That wasn't I got these questions along, you know, during the pandemic and everything, and it seemed like, you know, it wasn't really clear in the policy. That's all.
That's a good question. Other comments? Mr. Aiken?
So yeah, if we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that are in there. One of the questions I had is, and I had this question before, but it's never come up, the decision for us to have at-large seats and regional seats within Abington Heights. I never knew if that was a county mandate or if the school district and the board decides that. I know that when I ran for the board, along with a lot of people, there was a lot of activity, obviously, a couple years ago. Nobody that had kids in the school district or didn't have an affiliation with the board or knowledge of the board, they had no idea what region they were in. So to me, it's and I think the data, at least I remember during our offsite, shows that we're in a pretty small minority of school districts that do that. So I didn't know if we know the answer to this tonight, but I'd like to know if we have the ability to talk about that or change it potentially.
I don't know the answer, but I can tell you it's been in place for at least as long as I've been on the board.
I think
Mr. Abdullah will say it was forever. Something like that.
This might be a wrong percentage, but I thought I remembered in our offsite that like 3% of school districts have both.
I believe there's a public procedure you have to go through to establish the.
And I don't know if we should change it or not. I'm just bringing it up because I get a lot of questions about it.
Yeah, I did reach out to our solicitor, Mr. Aldi, to ask him about this because I was curious in that very few districts in Pennsylvania fill their seats, regions, and at large. Most are at large. So he will get back to me on that.
I'd like to compliment the administration and in particular the policy committee and Mrs. Tierney for a great start on this. And I also read with a great deal of interest the last item, number 11, Principles of Governance and Leadership. I think that's something that we all need to focus on as a board. Roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Acker.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Nikki?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah? Sorry.
Yes.
Well, Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0. Thank you.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask the board to approve the consider approving the Bucks County IU proposal for a human resources program quality review.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
No.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 8-1.
Okay, we have any informational items from the board members?
Just one reminder that we have our Information Technology Committee next week. It is April 12th, 6:30 in this room.
Please don't spend all our money.
Already did that. Check that box.
It's already gone. Is there any unfinished business?
Can I just
Mr.
say one
Abdallah.
thing? I know she's going to kill me, but Mrs. Frichet is in the audience. And she's retiring, and my kids loved her. So it's great for her that she's retiring, but sad for us.
Mrs. Frichet, thank you very much for your years of service to the Abington Heights community and to those many, many students you worked with. Thank you so much.
And she just had a new grandchild.
Excellent. Any new business? Mrs. Henderson?
I just wanted to take a minute to give a shout out to Mr. Preachy for his efforts in the inaugural math festival that was held last month. I also wanted to thank Dr. Vitale and our elementary principals for their help and support. I had the pleasure of stopping by this event. It was absolutely amazing. It was well organized. The energy was high. The student engagement was incredible. We had, I believe, 45 high school students come down to help facilitate. And we had over 175 families attend. I've planned and attended many, many, many events since my kids have been here for 10 years, and I would never have guessed that it was the first year that they were running something. It was absolutely amazing, and it was so nice to see. It was nice to see all 4 elementary schools coming together, everyone doing their part, and I think it just exemplified where we say students are the focus and excellence is the standard, because it was truly a remarkable event, so thank you very much.
Great, thank you very
And
much.
just one other thing on that, if not everyone has read it, Portrait of a Mathematician is a good read. It was actually well done.
Yes, beautiful.
May I gush? And really, that's kudos to Mr. Preachy and our math guiding committee, because they really worked very hard this year on looking at our math curriculum and setting what expectations are, so families, students, and teachers are all on the same page.
I just had a mild flashback of James Joyce, so.
Okay, let's leave on a high note. How about a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you. Good night.
Good night, Mickey.
Yeah.